Have you ever looked at your own life and felt like someone else had been writing the story the whole time? Like you were just acting out a script, smiling in the right moments, showing up when expected, only to realize one day the story was never yours? That's what happened to me. My name doesn't matter. My face probably looks like 100 other men you pass on the street. I'm not special. I never tried to be. I was just a husband, a father, a provider. And for 28 years I lived what I thought was a good life, until one day I learned that not a single part of it was real, not the love, not the marriage, not even the children. Before I take you into that story, before I tell you about the betrayal, the silence, and how I took back everything, I just want to say, and one thing, if you've ever loved someone so deeply that their lies nearly destroyed you, if you've ever stayed quiet, swallowed your pain, kept showing up because you thought that's what strength looked like, then this story is for you. And if you find something in it, a truth, a warning, a reflection of your own life, please consider subscribing to this channel. This is Toxic Truths. We don't dramatize pain here. We tell it like it is, slow, quiet, like a memory that still aches. Let me take you back. I met Lynn at a New Year's Eve party in 1993. I was 28, freshly promoted, thinking I had the world in front of me. She had this presence, like light drawn into a room. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but she looked at you like you were the only person that mattered. And that's how she made me feel from the start. Like I mattered. We talked that whole night. About music, childhood memories. She told me she had a brother who passed away when she was a teenager, and I remember thinking, this woman knows grief. That kind of depth draws you in. 2 years later, we were married. We didn't have much. I was working 2 jobs to pay off a small house on the edge of town. She stayed home, said she wanted to build a family. I admired that. When Matthew was born, I cried harder than I thought I would, holding him. I felt something click inside my chest, like this is what I was meant to be. A father. Then came Emma, and finally Josh, our little trio. My life had a rhythm. Monday through Friday, work, weekends, ball games and family dinners. Christmases were warm, birthdays were loud. We weren't rich, but we were something better. Stable. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, there were moments, small cracks, times when she seemed distant, when she'd retreat into herself for days, then come back with a smile and kiss on the cheek like nothing happened. I thought it was stress, or hormones, or just life. Because I never believed she would betray me. Not Lynn. Not the woman who looked me in the eye at our wedding and whispered, "You're my only home." I believed her for 28 years. Even when small doubts crept in, like when Emma was born and my sister said, "She doesn't look like either of you." I laughed it off. Genetics are weird, right? And when Lynn started working part-time at a local non-profit, I thought it was good for her. She needed space. I encouraged it. I supported her every step, even when she started working late, even when she went on overnight retreats, because love without trust is prison, and I refused to live in fear, so I trusted. Right up until the day my oldest, Matthew, came to me, looking pale and hesitant. "Dad, I need your DNA for something." He was applying to a specialized program that needed genetic verification. I agreed without a second thought, gave him my sample, made a joke about how he probably got my cholesterol, poor kid. 2 weeks later, he came back with the results. I'll never forget the way he looked at me, like he'd seen a ghost. "Dad, something's wrong. The test said I wasn't a match, not even close." We laughed, nervously. Said it must be a lab error, we'd redo it. It was probably mislabeled. We took another test, same result, and that was the first time, in 28 years, that the voice in the back of my mind didn't whisper, it screamed. Still, I didn't confront her, not yet. I wasn't ready to hear what I already knew. Instead, I watched. She was humming in the kitchen that night, stirring pasta, wearing my old college hoodie. She looked ordinary, familiar, like the woman I'd built my entire life with. But I couldn't. look at her without wondering whose child I had raised. I took one more test, this time with Josh, just to rule out the worst, but the worst had already arrived. Josh wasn't mine either. I felt my body go cold, like my blood had slowed. 3 children. 3 lies, and she had carried all of them. Like they were truth. I didn't sleep for days, I didn't eat, I didn't yell, I just sat in that silence, from the kind that only comes when your world breaks so cleanly, so completely, there's nothing left to scream about. Eventually, I asked her to sit down. I said, "We need to talk about Matthew." She didn't even ask why, because she already knew. When I told her about Matthew's test, I expected denial, shock, tears, but she didn't even flinch. She stared at me, silent, still, then slowly. Her lips parted, and she said 4 words I will never forget. "How long have you known?" Not, "What are you talking about?" Not, "That's not possible." Just how long. I felt something deep in me go quiet, not explode, not rage, just quiet, like when a power line snaps during a storm and the whole house dims, not from damage, but from truth. She looked down at her hands, took a breath, and then she began to talk. Her voice was calm, controlled, like someone confessing to a crime they'd already made peace with. She said she was sorry, that she never meant for it to go this far, that she was a different person back then. And then she began telling me things I had never asked for, like she wanted to be caught. Matthew's real father was a man named David, a co-worker. She said it happened when I was working late shifts in the early years of our marriage. That I'd become distant, that he had listened. It was just once, she said, a mistake. But then she paused, and I waited, because we both knew that wasn't the end. Emma? She wasn't mine either. Her father's name was Sean, an old friend from college who came to visit one summer while I was out of town. I remembered that visit. I remembered how she said it was so nice to catch up. I never even thought to question it. Then, Josh, the youngest, the one who still called me Dad when he woke up from nightmares, the one who used to sit on my shoulders during fireworks and laugh so hard I thought my chest might burst. She hesitated longer with Josh, but finally, she whispered, "It might be Tom." Another man, another friend, another lie. She looked at me then, tears finally forming, and she said, "But you were the one who raised them. That's what matters, right?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because if I opened my mouth, I was afraid I'd break. She reached for my hand across the table, and I pulled away, not harshly, not dramatically, just enough. That was when she began to panic. Not because she regretted what she'd done, but because she realized she might lose the one person who made all of it work. The man who showed up, who provided, who loved without question. And now, that man was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't unsee the truth. She started to bargain. She said we could fix this, that we shouldn't punish the kids, that maybe it didn't really matter, not after all these years. But every word she said only widened the distance between us. Because what she didn't understand was this. It wasn't just about biology, it was about trust. About the way she looked me in the eye, year after year, and let me believe a life that was never mine to live. I asked her one question. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She looked away, then whispered, "I didn't want to lose you." But in trying to keep me, she had already lost me. I left the house that night, got into my truck, drove aimlessly for hours. No music, no calls, just the sound of my own breathing. Yarp, steady, unreal. I slept in the cab. I woke up with a stiff neck and 1,000 thoughts crashing in my head like waves. Should I tell the kids? Should I leave? Could I even stay? For days, I drifted through the motions. I still made breakfast, still asked them about their homework, still tucked Josh in when he couldn't sleep, but every glance at their faces hurt. Not because they weren't mine, but because they still thought I was theirs, and I didn't know how to tell them the truth without breaking something pure. I watched Lynn carefully. She was quieter now, less sure of herself. She cleaned obsessively, cooked my favorite meals, wore the perfume I once said reminded me of autumn. She thought maybe if she acted like the woman I married, I'd forget she had buried a knife in my back. But I didn't. Forget. I just went quiet. And in that silence, I began to make a plan, not out of rage, not to destroy her, but to take my life back. On my terms. I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity. I wanted the weight lifted from my chest. I wanted to look in the mirror and recognize the man staring back. Not as a victim, but as someone who survived being lied to for nearly 3 decades and still walked forward. That began with one decision. I would find out the full truth of it, no matter how deep the lie went, because if Lynn had lied about the children, what else had she hidden? There's a strange clarity that comes when your world collapses. It doesn't happen all at once. It arrives slowly, like fog lifting from a field at dawn. At first, all you see is wreckage. But then, you start seeing patterns. That's what... I saw patterns, dates that didn't line up, old memories that no longer made sense. I stopped asking why she did it. That was a dead-end road. The better question was, how far did it go, and what else was I blind to? So I went looking. It started with small things. I pulled old receipts from our storage boxes, anniversary cards with messages that now felt rehearsed. I reread emails we'd sent each other over the years, hoping to find warmth, but mostly finding distance. Then I found something I hadn't remembered. An old burner phone, tucked in the back of a kitchen drawer inside a pencil case. Dead. Battery. Cracked screen. But I knew that phone didn't belong to me. I hadn't seen it in years. It didn't take long to charge, and when I powered it on, everything changed. Dozens of old texts. Some under saved contact names, others just numbers. But the content was clear. They weren't just one-time mistakes. These were relationships, long, drawn-out exchanges, flirty, bitter, intimate, plans made, secrets shared. Some from years ago. Some more recent than I wanted to believe. She had called them mistakes. But these weren't stumbles. They were choices. Repeated, calculated, deliberate choices. She spoke about me in those texts like I was an inconvenience. I'm background character in the story of her life. He's working late again. I'll slip out after dinner. He still thinks Josh is his. Unbelievable. I wish I could just leave, but the money's in his name. That last one hit me, like a punch to the chest. I'd spent years carrying this family, 2 jobs in the early days, late nights, sacrificed my dream of opening my own business. I did it so she could stay home, so the kids wouldn't have to grow up with strangers raising them. And now I saw how she spoke of me when I wasn't listening. That's when I stopped grieving and started preparing. The next week, I met with a lawyer. Quietly. No divorce yet. Just questions. What were my rights? What could I separate? How could I protect myself? Legally, financially, emotionally. He gave me a roadmap, and I followed it. I started a new bank account. In my name only. Shifted. Part of my paycheck. Opened a P.O. box. Got a second phone. One she didn't know about. Every move was calm, measured, silent. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to disappear from her control, piece by piece. Meanwhile, at home, she was pretending nothing had happened. She smiled, laughed, called me babe again like we were newlyweds. She made my coffee in the morning, left handwritten notes beside my lunch. She played the part perfectly, and I let her, because letting her believe she still had power made it easier to take it away. But the hardest part was the kids. They still had no idea. They loved her. And they loved me. And in their eyes, we were still a family. Maybe strained, maybe quiet, but still intact. I knew that wouldn't last forever. So I focused on learning the full truth before I brought them into it. And I found something else. Her emails. She had left one open on the family computer, maybe by mistake, maybe because she never imagined I'd read it. It was from a name I didn't recognize. TC inside was a single line. Still thinking about last month. You were amazing. Does your husband suspect anything yet? The timestamp, 3 months ago, after the DNA tests, after she cried and begged and told me there had been nothing in years. She hadn't stopped. She'd just gotten smarter. Or maybe lazier. Maybe after nearly 30 years of lying, she just didn't care anymore. But I did. That email was the final switch, because now it wasn't about the past. It was about who she still was, even when exposed, even when given a chance to come clean. She chose deception again, and that meant the old version of me, the one who waited, forgave, stayed quiet. He had to die. I started making moves. I hired a private investigator, not to catch her. I already had enough. But to track where the money went. See, over the years I noticed small inconsistencies in our finances, missing amounts. 87 withdrawals in towns she never mentioned visiting. The PI found it all, 3 men, 1 child likely from each with financial transactions from our accounts, hotels, gifts, wire transfers, over $12,000 in misappropriated funds. Just in the last 5 years, she had taken my money to fund her affairs. I couldn't unsee that. I couldn't unknow it. And that's when I knew. It was time to tell the kids. They deserved the truth. Not the dirty version. Not the salacious details. But the heart of it, that their mother had lied and that I still loved them even if we didn't share DNA. I didn't know how they'd react. I feared they'd hate me for telling them. But what I feared more was that they'd grow up believing. A false story about who their parents really were, and so I called a family meeting, no yelling, just truth. We sat around the table, the same table where we'd carved pumpkins, celebrated birthdays, shared dinners when everyone still talked easily, laughed without effort, except this time it was silent. Just the 4 of us, me, Matthew, Emma, and Josh. No plates. No food, just the weight of something coming. I looked at each of them, grown now, not children anymore, even if part of me still wanted to protect them like they were. My throat tightened. I almost backed out, almost told myself it could wait. But it couldn't, so I began. I need to tell you something, I said. They shifted in their seats. Josh looked worried. Emma leaned forward, arms crossed. Matthew just watched me carefully, like he already sensed what was coming. I told them about the DNA test. I didn't blame their mother. I didn't call her names. I didn't make it ugly. I just told the truth. That after Matthew asked for my DNA, for his med school application, something didn't add up, that I took another test, then another, and they all came back the same. I'm not your biological father, I said softly. The room stayed silent, not gasps. No protests, just quiet. Emma was the first to speak. What does that mean? It means your mother was with someone else. Years ago. Around the time each of you were conceived. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. Josh looked, down at the table, still too young to fully absorb what that meant, but old enough to know it meant something. Matthew? He didn't even blink. I wondered, he said. After the test, I wondered. I nodded. I didn't want to believe it either. We sat there like that for a few minutes, not as a family falling apart, but as people suspended in disbelief. Each one quietly reshuffling their memories. Then I said something that hurt more than anything I'd said in my life. You can ask for space if you need it. I won't hold it against you. But Matthew shook his head. You're my dad. Period. Emma nodded, eyes welling. You were there for everything, every damn thing. I don't care what biology says. And Josh, my youngest, said the only words that mattered. You never lied to me. I don't know how long I cried. I just remember, my shoulders shaking and Emma's hand on my back. We stayed up late that night. They asked questions. I answered them. We talked about the years, the small moments. They told me things I didn't know, about how they always wondered why Mom seemed so removed. How they noticed her checking out emotionally, even if they couldn't explain. It as kids. And in that shared darkness, we found something real again, not perfect but honest. When Lynn came home the next evening, the air had changed. She walked in, cheerful, keys jingling in her hand, some forced cheer in her voice. Hey! They grabbed dinner on the way home. She didn't notice right away, until Emma barely looked up from the couch, until Josh stayed in his room with the door shut, until Matthew walked right past her without saying a word. Then she knew. And when she looked at me, she really knew. She didn't ask. I didn't explain. There was nothing left to say. The mask she'd worn for nearly 3 decades cracked, and for the first time, I saw panic in her eyes. Not the performative kind, not guilt, but fear. She knew what was coming. But what she didn't know was how far I'd already gone. The house? I'd already begun the paperwork to transfer it into my name under a separate trust. The joint account, I'd split it, legally, with documentation. The retirement fund, frozen, with the court's approval, pending divorce proceedings, and the evidence? Organized, backed up, categorized in folders by date, with names and supporting financial records. I was no longer the man begging for answers. I was the man preparing the ground to take my life back, piece by piece, and she had no idea just how. Much I already knew. That night, she finally broke the silence. "You told them," she said flatly. I didn't respond. She stood across from me at the kitchen island, hands shaking, trying to decide whether to cry or lash out. "I didn't mean for it to be this way." "I know," I said. "That's what makes it worse. She begged me not to destroy what was left, that the kids needed stability, that maybe we could work through this. But her words didn't land like they used to. They sounded like echoes in a house already emptied. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Do you still love me?" And I answered honestly, "I don't even know who you are." The next morning, I went to a meeting, not with a lawyer this time, with someone from her past, someone who knew more than I did, someone who had every reason to stay quiet, but finally chose not to, and what he told me would change everything. He was older now, thinner than I remembered, eyes tired, voice hoarse. Tom had been one of those background names from early in our marriage, a family friend. I had shaken his hand once at a party. We talked about football. He laughed too, loud and drank too slow. And according to Lynn, he was nothing. But now he sat across from me at a small cafe downtown, fiddling with a paper napkin like it held secrets. I didn't ask him to apologize. I didn't need him to. I just wanted the truth. He told me everything. The affair had lasted 2 years. Started while she was going through something, as she put it. He knew I existed. He knew we were married. But he believed her when she said we were basically done. I asked him one question. "Do you think Josh is yours?" He looked away. "I don't know. But I've wondered." Then he pulled something from his jacket, a flash drive. It's all there, emails, pictures, some voice notes. I didn't flinch. I just took it, because I wasn't surprised anymore. I was ready. That night, I didn't confront Lynn. I didn't throw the flash drive on the table or demand an explanation. I let her make dinner. Let her laugh at a show I wasn't watching. Let her pour me tea like everything was still intact. Because it was better that way. Better to let her feel the last of her illusion before I pulled it all away, gently, completely. Over the next 2 days, I watched the contents of that drive. It was worse than I thought. She hadn't just cheated, she had co-authored a second life. Jokes about me, conversations about raising Josh if things ever went south, plans to meet when I was at work trips, voice notes where she whispered things I hadn't heard from her in years. And the worst part, she sounded happy. Not guilty, not conflicted, just alive. Like I was the dull pause between the chapters that actually mattered. That's when I knew. She didn't deserve to leave quietly, not after the way she gutted our marriage and wore it like a costume for decades. So I set the dinner, one last time, tablecloth, wine, her favorite candles. She walked in, confused but curious, sat across from me with that careful smile. "Is this an apology dinner?" she asked, half joking. I smiled back. "No, it's a farewell." I pushed the manila envelope across the table. Inside, divorce papers, a financial breakdown, a list of all her known affairs, labeled with years, names, amounts spent, and DNA, test results. She opened it slowly, each page stripped color from her face. Her lips moved, trying to form words, maybe denials, maybe tears. But I kept going. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. The documents are done. The house is being transferred. The accounts are split. The lawyer is ready." She tried to interrupt. I raised a hand, gently. "And I've spoken to Tom." Now she froze. I've seen the messages, the recordings, the pictures. Her eyes darted around the room like she could find a door that would let her run backward. In time, there's nothing left to hide, I said. Then I added, "You can lie to yourself if you want. But you won't lie to me anymore." She didn't scream, didn't cry, not yet. She just went quiet. For the first time since this all began, she had no script, no act to fall into, only reality. She stood up, left the room, said nothing, and that, silence, it was the most honest thing she'd ever given me. The next day, I filed everything, publicly. No drama, no press, just paper, ink, truth. I had no interest in destroying her, but I wasn't going to protect her anymore either. She had lived in comfort while I lived in fiction. Now, she would live with consequence. The fallout came fast. Mutual friends began to back away. The women in her volunteer circles stopped replying. One of the board directors from the non-profit she consulted with quietly requested she step away from public duties to focus on family. She had spent decades building her reputation. It cracked within weeks, and through it all, I didn't say a word. Not online, not in the group chat, not to the neighbors, because I didn't have to. The truth was already walking on its own legs. Now, Emma called me 2 days after the papers were filed. She told me it was all lies, she said. That you were making it up. I didn't respond. I told her I'd seen the emails, Emma added. She started crying, blamed you for telling us. What did you say? Emma took a breath. I said, she should have told us years ago. And that I'm proud of you. It was quiet for a moment, then she whispered, you didn't deserve this. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Thank you, I said. Neither did you. The war wasn't over yet. There was still one more twist, one last moment, that would bring it all full circle. But for now, she had finally felt the sting of something I'd endured in silence for 28 years. Powerlessness. She started packing her things a few days after the papers were filed, not because she wanted to, because she had to. The trust I'd placed the house in gave her no legal claim. The bank account she once used for groceries and hotel reservations, with lovers, was now locked. The kids barely spoke to her. She moved like someone underwater, slow, blurry, uncertain. I watched from the hallway as she folded her sweaters into neat piles, paused for long moments while staring at photo frames. She didn't know I was there, or maybe she did, but couldn't face me. She hadn't cried yet, not really. She had wept for effect, sniffled for sympathy. But she hadn't broken, and that was what made her dangerous for so long. Lynn didn't crack. She calculated. She built stories, played victim, made herself the center of every emotional room. It was how she survived. It was how she controlled, but she had one blind spot, me. She thought I would always protect her image, even after the betrayal, even after the silence, even after the lies multiplied like mold in a sealed box. She thought I'd care more about indignity than truth. She was wrong. 2 weeks after she moved out, our community hosted a local business mixer. One of those things she used to shine at. Small speeches, handshakes, compliments on her dress. I didn't think she'd show, but she did. Hair curled, lipstick flawless, smile painted on like armor. She was walking through the room like nothing had changed. Still wearing the name Mrs. like a badge. What she didn't know was that the keynote speaker was me. They had invited me to share my story. Not the betrayal, of course, but the rebirth. How I'd built a construction business from scratch. How I'd gone from employee to owner. How I'd done it all quietly, in the shadows of grief. As I stepped on stage, our eyes met, and something flickered in hers. She still didn't know what I'd say. Still believed I would protect her. That after everything, I wouldn't risk my reputation just to make her look bad. But again, she didn't know me anymore. I told the room about heartbreak. About how betrayal doesn't always come with yelling or doors slamming. Sometimes, it comes quietly, in the form of a smile that's too easy, or years that pass without questions asked. I told them about truth. About what it costs to tell it, and what it costs when you don't. And I finished with this. I spent 28 years living in a house that wasn't mine, Loving a woman who wore a mask, raising children I didn't know weren't biologically mine. And still, I have no regrets. Because the man who walked away from that house, he didn't just survive, he rebuilt. The room was silent. No applause yet, just wait, real wait. Then someone clapped, then another and another. I stepped down. Lynn was gone. Later that evening, I got a text from her, just 3 words. "You humiliated me." I stared at the screen for a while, then replied, "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped hiding it for you." She didn't text back. Not that night. Not again, but the damage was done. Her image, the one she had curated so carefully, had cracked in front of people who mattered to her. Not because I screamed, because I stood, and the truth did the rest. She started losing connections. The non-profit board dropped her quietly. The community outreach group restructured. Her name stopped appearing on invitations, not because anyone wanted revenge, but because nobody likes being lied to, especially by someone who built their whole life on seeming good. I didn't gloat, didn't brag. That wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was peace. And finally it had arrived. The house was quiet, but not heavy, just calm. I ate dinner with the kids on Sundays. Josh brought over his science projects. Emma texted me daily. Matthew had started calling me just to talk, not because they felt obligated, but because they chose to. And that choice? It meant more than biology ever could. One afternoon, Emma sat with me on the porch. She looked out at the yard for a while before saying, "She told me you ruined her life." I didn't answer. Then she added, "I told her she ruined her own, and that you're the only reason any of us made it out okay." I looked at her, my daughter, and I believed her. Not because I needed to, because for the first time in 28 years, I finally believed in myself. I never imagined my life would end up like this. Not when I first stood at that altar, not when I held my first child, not when I came home late from double shifts, thinking I was building something real, something lasting. But here I am. And strangely, I don't feel broken. I feel whole. It didn't happen overnight. It took months, quiet nights, empty mornings, 1,000 small decisions that nobody applauded. Just me, relearning how to live. The house is quieter now. Not sad. Not haunted. Just honest. No secrets beneath the floorboards, no weight in the corners, just space. Space to heal, to breathe, to become something new. Matthew calls me once a week, sometimes more. He tells me about rotations at the hospital, about the first time he held a patient's hand as they passed. He says he understands now what it means to carry someone else's life. Emma visits often. She cooks better than I ever could. She fills the kitchen with laughter. She doesn't ask questions about the past anymore. She just shows up. And Josh, he still lives part-time with me. He plays music now, writes little songs. One day I heard him through the walls singing, "You don't need blood to be family." I didn't cry. But I sat on the floor outside his room and closed my eyes for a long, long time. As for Lynn, I don't know where she is now. We don't speak. The last thing she sent was an email. Months ago. It was long, defensive. Half apology, half blame. She said I had weaponized the truth, that I had humiliated her beyond repair, that maybe she did make mistakes, but she never stopped loving me. I read it once, then deleted it, because loving someone while destroying them isn't love, it's control. And I refuse to live under that ever again. People ask me now, when they hear the story, how I stayed calm, how I didn't explode, how I didn't burn everything down. The truth is, I wanted to, many nights, I wanted to scream. But I learned something through all of this. There is power in restraint, there is dignity in silence, and sometimes the best revenge is peace. I built something new, not just a company, not just a life. Self, one not defined by betrayal, but by survival, by clarity, by love. Not the kind that's spoken when cameras are on or neighbors are watching, but the quiet, steady kind that shows up when no one else does. The kind I gave for 28 years, the kind I finally gave to myself. So if you're listening to this, and something in it felt familiar, If you've sat in that silence, swallowed that pain, smiled through betrayal because you didn't know what else to do, you're not weak, you're not stupid, you're not broken. You're braver than you know, because telling the truth and still choosing to live takes more strength than most people will ever understand. This is Toxic Truths. If this story reached you, if it helped you breathe a little deeper or feel a little less alone, I hope you'll consider subscribing, not just for more stories like this, but because you deserve to feel seen, even if the world told you to stay quiet. Especially then. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. And remember, they can take everything from you, but they can't take your peace, not unless you let them, and I didn't.